Hey, welcome to the third part of electrical power aboard Guenevere. Now, if you haven't already done so, please go back to number 1 and watch the disclaimer from Guenevere's legal department. Want to make sure that's clear for everyone. So in this video, I'm going to talk about power generation aboard. And I'm going to talk about what I know about. I'm not going to give you specs and things like that. I'll give links down below to pertinent areas, specs, whatever, that can give you the nitty-gritty of it. This is just an overview look. When we decided to go cruising, well, when we were preparing to go cruising, because I've wanted to go cruising all my life, we looked at first wind generators. They looked good on paper. You know, I read all the specs and I read all that. But while we were living aboard and sailing on weekends in the Bay Area, I got to anchor close to people who had wind generators and talk to a few of them who were very honest with us. A couple of things come to mind when you talk wind generators. Number one, they need a lot of wind to produce much power. Personally, I don't choose my anchorages for a lot of wind. I choose my anchorages for no wind, if I can get it, or just a gentle breeze. And in a gentle breeze, wind generators were just not putting out enough. So they dropped off our list. Now, the next thing was a generator, you know, gas-powered generator. There's a whole lot of good things to say about gas-powered generators. They're at the ready as long as you've got gas. And most of us who have a dinghy have an outboard motor, so we do have some gasoline aboard. It's safe as long as you handle it correctly. But I'm here to tell you, if you have a generator and you say, oh, my generator's quiet, and when I'm anchored out in these remote locations, my neighbors don't mind at all because it's so quiet. Well, I'm here to tell you, you have polite neighbors. It's not because your generator doesn't bother them. It does. I've been by generators and I've sucked down my coffee grumbling under my breath. I actually purchased a generator, a small one, to bring aboard. On our size boat, they were just a pain. It was it wasn't so heavy that I couldn't carry it, but it was heavy enough that it was awkward to move in and out. I tried to wrap it in a plastic bag so it didn't always have to be down below. Plastic bag just went away in the weather. And to tell you the absolute truth, I bought the generator, spent the money. We had it aboard for a year and a half, somewhere around there. I don't remember exactly which. And during that time, I never once used it to generate power aboard. That's ours. Now, what we did go with was solar panels. Solar panels are absolutely silent. They just pump and pump out. As long as you got sun, they're working. So if you decide to go with solar panels like we did, one of the first things you should think about as you're doing it is how and where to mount them. You want them out of the shade as much as you can. You want them not in the way. If you purchase the certain type of solar panel, you can actually walk on them so they can be part of your deck. I never actually took them at their word and walked on solar panels. A major item to think about when you're deciding where and how you're going to mount them, and them, I say them because, well, we'll talk about that in a minute. I cannot stress strongly enough, never ever mount them permanently. What you want to do is you want to mount them so that you can get to them, you can clean them, and you can remove them. Now, we went through 3 hurricanes, all 3 hurricanes, all the solar panels, along with sails and biminis and Dodgers, everything came off the boat. You want to be able to simply unplug them, not have to cut a wire, remove some screws if need be, but preferably quick release things, and take them down below. They've got to fit somewhere and be able to be stored down below for hurricane. We also remove our solar panel for towing. Most of you probably have bigger boats and you don't tow, but we do. And the last thing I want is a rock from a passing truck or even my truck bouncing up and whacking that solar panel. It's going to make for a bad day. You're going to be unhappy about it. Now that you know, or you're pretty sure where you're going to mount them, it's time to start selecting panel size and how many you're going to mount. If you have a place to mount a huge panel, that's one thing. But if you don't, perhaps you can look at mounting multiple panels in different places. Now that's the route we went with. That gives you some major options in that if one panel goes bad for some reason, you don't lose all your power generation. One thing that we found out after being in the Sea of Cortez for a while was that in reality, now we sailed off the west coast, offshore, plenty of time, but in the sea, we were anchoring for days, weeks, months at a time. And what we found was that when we were anchored, we wanted more electrical power generation than when we were transiting. So having multiple panels works into that perfectly. So now that you've decided where you're going to mount them and how many you can mount, we're thinking about this in our head and putting this on paper, you want to determine how much wattage do you want. Now, as I said with batteries, this is a trade-off. Do you want as much wattage as you can and you're going to hang panels everywhere and do all kinds of weird stuff to get a bazillion watts of power out of your panels? Or do you want to size them right for what you're doing? We met a couple of boats, I think 2, in the Sea of Cortez that always bragged, our entire battery system is fully charged before noon every day. I congratulated them on the amount of power that they were generating, but in the back of my mind, I kind of thinking, boy, you spent a lot of money, didn't you? Because you really didn't need that much power generation if you were totally recharging your batteries before noon every day. Okay, I go into a little of the then and now. Things are changing, and they're changing rapidly. As I said in one of the other videos, the car makers are putting batteries in cars, which are going to help us a lot. Solar panels have changed drastically. When we first left San Francisco Bay Area, we had 4 solar panels, and this is one of them. And they're the semi-flexible roll-up panel. Now, I still have them. I actually like them a lot. You can roll them out on deck, you can walk on them, they're tough. They're really tough as nails. Downside is this panel weighs 4 pounds, 8 ounces. And that's pretty heavy. Now when we put our shade tree up, my idea was, oh, I'll put these on top of the shade tree. But in reality, they're actually too heavy to put on top of the shade tree. They make it bow in. Now each one of these, look at the size of this. Each one of these puts out 32 watts. Now, as I said, that ran our refrigerator as long as we weren't cycling water in and out of it every day and stuff like that. One of the other benefits of these, which is very interesting to me, is these are what's called dual junction solar panels. Now, when you get some solar panels, predominantly the rigid, hard cased panels, are single junction. And what this means is, if a solid panel is put out, and I just put my hand across the panel, the power output drops from whatever to almost zero, because the power goes from one cell to the next cell to the next cell to the next cell and then out. Dual junction, I can put my hand across here and I lose maybe 10% of the panel power, because there's runarounds for the power to find its way where it needs to go. So although these are only 32 watts, in any area where they might get shaded, I'm actually getting more power than I would from a 50 watter in that same spot. So I really like these. I'm certainly going to keep them for a long time, and as long as they keep working and earning their keep, I'm going to keep them around. Like I said, the downside, 4.8 pounds. Now, this is one of my newest acquisitions. I just picked up 2 of these. They're semi-flexible, and each one of these puts out 100 watts of power. The upside too is they weigh about 3 pounds 7 ounces. So I'm thinking these can fit up on the shade tree when we're at anchor. So as you see, I've got some strings on them. We were using them in Florida for testing them out and playing with them, and they're working awfully good for us. They're stored, because they're semi-flexible, in the aft cabin when we're transiting, doing anything like that. And I bring them out and set them up when we're at anchor for more than 24 hours. I know if we're going to be at anchor for a while and I want some extra power, charge those computers up and cycle a lot of goodies through the refrigerator, this is it. These 2 can come out and get set up. Now, the one panel, a Kyocera 85 watt rigid panel that we have aboard and mounted permanently aft, sits back on our aft rail in front of the monitor wind vane, and that stays on all the time. But most of the rest of these are removable for transient. Now, one of the things that I did is, I like it, Jill's not real thrilled with it, is on the stays, on the side stays, I have a pin rail with 3 belaying pins on each side. Those belaying pins hold our lines off the mast. We don't make noise at night, things like that. I think they look good too. What I did is put snap hinges. A snap hinge, if you're not familiar with it, is 2 parts. It's a spring-loaded plunger that puts them together. So you pull it, it pops off, you put it in, snap it together, and it's on. And the panels hang down. When we get to it, I can put them on, and for light sailing, day or 2, they bungee toward the stays, the side stays down, and I can sail with them. I wouldn't keep them out there if there was a storm or I was getting into any rough weather. I could just snap them off and take them below. That way, I can bring them up with a post underneath them or a thin line above them holding them up, so they can be down when we're sailing into an anchorage. Once we get set up, I just raise them up and boom, I've got power from them. In case that it didn't come across, I'm a big fan of multiple panels. One of the things with multiple panels is if you've got them around, you're going to need multiple connections. So I went and picked up a few of these, and they're relatively inexpensive. I can connect 4 panels to this output, and this goes back to the power in for charging if you use this type. Now the newer panels I really like have a much better, much more robust waterproof fitting, and I purchased this, which takes 2 panels and 2 panels. Each of these is a pair, and it comes out. So this will connect 2 panels together to one lead to come in. I purchased a few of these so that I can rig up all the panels I want. Now, where and how do you connect up the panels to come into the boat? This is my main solar panel forward power in. Here's my 110 shore power from dockside. We'll talk about that later maybe. This is the solar panel one. Notice I used the biggest wire I could get into there, and this has a little cap on it that makes it waterproof when you're sailing. When you're not sailing, one of the things that I like about this is look at the size of this. Look at the number of contacts and the big contacts. So when I plug this in, I know I'm getting a big contact. Originally, I had one of these, which you can, every marine store sells a bunch of these, okay? I had that in San Francisco Bay Area, and it was okay. It worked fairly good. Now, one of the downsides is, yes, you can't plug it in backwards. It has one large and one small pin. However, you need to be very cautious because, while it won't plug in backwards, it will make contact backwards. And I've blown a couple of fuses out of like a radar because in the middle of the night I hit those wrong, and just it took, you know, a split second like power does, and it went bad. Now the other downside to these that I didn't like was that after about a year of use in the Sea of Cortez, hot, humid, salty environment, it started going bad. Now, it never looked bad, but the problem was it was corroded up inside. The one that I had actually had a split down each of these, and I could put a knife in it and spread them out a little bit, and I'd have to sand them off a little bit and stuff, because it quit making contact, or there was too much corrosion inside there, even though I was cleaning it off. And the royal pain was that it would do that, and I wouldn't know it had done that until I'm starting to check the batteries. You know, I might be gone for a day off the boat, out fishing or snorkeling, and I come back and lo and behold, the batteries didn't charge for half the day. That reverse polarity thing cannot happen with this type of plug. Now the bad part about this type of plug is there's not a hole, there's not a collar that I can screw in to make it absolutely waterproof, but I don't usually ever use this when we're at sea sailing. This is for the panels that go up on the sides and the bow when we're at anchor. Now, this is our aft deck, and outboard mounts up here, cleats, wind vane and all. This is the plug for our aft mounted rigid 85 watt solar panel. Unplug, plug it in. This one has worked fairly well. It's not the same as the one I just showed you that I didn't like up there. Has to be cleaned often, but once it's plugged in, it's got a rubber boot on it that prevents water from getting in, and it's lasted quite a bit. There's a product I found called Deoxit, and you might look into that. It's for electrical contacts. You spray a little bit on, it foams a little bit, and it cleans the contacts as if you had sanded them. Kind of a miracle type stuff. And I use that at the beginning of the season, and I'm good. Now, one of the things that I didn't have before that I'm going to add, I'd like to show you. It's right down here. Let's take a closer look. Okay, so under here is our engine panel. I've got a new fuel gauge to put in there, and my windlass control from the cockpit, although I almost never use that. Jill's back here, I'm forward. When we first were living aboard the boat, and it was back in ancient times, the only people who had cell phones were very special people, and the cell phones only came in size 8.5 or 9.5. But we had a phone connection. This is actually a hardwire phone connection for marine use. What I'm going to do is I'm going to remove that, and in its place I'm going to put a 12 volt connection out here, and it will feed from the using side of my battery monitoring system. Cigarette lighter adapters are all well and good for little things, but I'm telling you right now, they don't handle higher amperage items. So what I came with the idea of is I got this. It's for an electric trolling motor. It actually doesn't look all that much different than this one, but because it's polarized and it'll take a lot more power, accepts 8 to 10 gauge wire, 12, 24, 36 volts. You know, it's rugged, and it comes with the waterproof plug to go over it. So that's how I'm going to hook that up, and if I chose to, I could actually get a couple more of the plugs and put one on the hook and put one on an adapter, so that I could actually put solar charging into it or generator charging into it. Actually, we run that through the 110 on the side. I've made up a cable that has a 30 amp adapter that plugs into the boat with a 110 adapter that plugs into like a wall socket adapter, and I've used that at a number of marinas that didn't have 30 amp, and that works just fine. So I've shown you what we do for solar power and our philosophy behind it, and I was gonna try to wrap in our charge controlling system, how we control the power that comes into the boat and charges our battery. But I think I've bored you long enough with this video, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it off now and do another short video, and I'll go into charge controllers, what they are, how they work, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that really is that way. So stay tuned for the next video in the line. If you like the video, please click the like and subscribe if you're interested in this series or more series like this. So I'm going to cut it off for now, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.